Okay, let's listen to Manu Raju and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
To Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Sorry about Kevin Durant's injury. It was a very grisly injury. Hope he's okay. Before we get into the issues of the conference, I do want to talk about some of the issues that have been in the news over the past week. You were traveling abroad, and you were in Normandy. The president was in Normandy, too, and he made some comments about you. He was sitting in the American cemetery in Normandy, and probably the most aggressive remarks I've heard from a president make about a Speaker of the House. He said that you were nervous. He called you a disaster. He also called you a nasty, vindictive, horrible person. This is not me. This is the president saying this. He later went on to tweet that you are a disgrace to yourself and your family. So, I mean, how do you react to the President of the United States calling you, the Speaker of the House, insulting you like that?
Well, what bothers me more is that we're talking about that instead of how to reduce the national debt. Let's just say this. We were in Normandy, and that morning, before the President made his statement, I was being interviewed by MSNBC, and they asked me about the President, and I said, we're here about our veterans, and I have a rule for any Codels, and you can ask anyone, Democratic or Republican, always say the first rule of our Codel is we never criticize a president of the United States when we are overseas. That we just don't do that. We have plenty of time to do that back home, but when we travel, we don't, and especially when we're here to honor the courage of our veterans and thank them for that courage, and also to salute the cooperation and collaboration of our country with our allies in the greatest naval invasion in the history of the world to save civilization as we know it today and our freedoms. So I said, basically, I'm not here to say anything about the president. And we had the same backdrop, the tombstones of our veterans who are buried in Normandy. The president took a different tact. I don't think it.
But how do you work with
I'm done with him. I don't even want to talk about it.
But how do you work? I mean, you have to work with them. How do you work with them after he levels such an insult against you overseas?
I just consider the source.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, my stock goes up every time he attacks me. So what can I say? But let's not spend too much time on that because that's his victory. The diverter of attention in chief. You know, we'll talk about this instead of talking about the fact that the president his behavior in terms of tariffs and trade and all the issues in terms of what we need to do for our country to solve some of the challenges that we face. Infrastructure. We thought that we had a working relationship with him on that. He's always talked about infrastructure as a priority, and I believed him in that regard. But when it came time to pay for it, he diverted attention to personal nastiness. But, you know, again, that's not the point. It's a waste of time.
But he was apparently set off by remarks you reportedly made in private, saying that you'd rather see him in prison than impeached. Is that how you really feel?
I don't care what motivates him, and we never know. But in front of the tombstones of our fallen, when we're there to observe the 75th anniversary of Normandy, you be the judge as to whether you think it's appropriate for the president to take that tack. That's all I'm going to say about it. I don't care what you ask anymore. I'm not going to talk about him anymore.
But I want to know, did you actually say that? Did you actually say that the president, you would rather see him in prison than
when we have conversations in our caucus, they stay in our caucus. Do people think that there's some impeachable offenses that the president committed? Yes. How serious are they? Are they criminal? Many people think they are.
Do you think they are?
But that's not I'm here to talk about.
And we will get into that. I promise you.
I'm not going to that place of what happens within our caucus. What we're talking about is what's happening within our country, about how we go forward with investments in the future to educate a workforce for the 21st century, workforce development essential to infrastructure development. Our For the People agenda. For the people. That was what we ran on. That's what we are delivering. For the people, health care, with lowering the cost of health care by lowering the cost of prescription drugs and guaranteeing and strengthening the pre-existing condition benefit. Lowering health care costs, bigger paychecks by building infrastructure of America in a green way for the future, and cleaner government. H.R. 1 to stop it. We won the Congress a 40-seat net gain in the Congress, in the most gerrymandered, voter-suppressed political arena in history, and yet we won 40 seats. But that's not right. We have to end the voter suppression, have people choosing their representatives rather than representatives choosing their constituents through partisan gerrymandering. So that is our agenda. That's the bills that we are passing, and we want the Senate to pick up some of the legislation and go forward in terms of the Dreamers, the Equality Act, LGBTQ. As we begin Gay Pride Week, we passed a couple of weeks ago the Equality Act, which ends discrimination against the LGBTQ community. The Dreamers, the gold standard of immigrants to our country.